Welcome to the networking webinar hosted by the Second Decade Society. Today's panelists include Molly Barnes-Esposito, Brian Drolet, Julie Ho, and Ben Phillips.
And before we dive into things, we just wanted to introduce you quickly to the Second Decade Society. For more than a quarter century, the Second Decade Society has provided valued assistance to the Johns Hopkins University Krieger School of Arts and Sciences in support of undergraduate students. It is a board comprised of arts and science alums in their second decade who are committed to enhancing the undergraduate experience. We strive to meet needs when and where they appear, working closely with the Krieger School Dean, who is Dean Wendland currently, to meet the goals of the Krieger School. We provide advice, financial support for students through programming and leadership opportunities. You'll see us on campus for summer internship program as well as the Meg Walsh Scholarship.
Great. So we definitely look forward to answering your questions. That's one of the, I think, the most informative parts of the presentation. So once we've completed reviewing these slides, we will welcome your questions, and you can enter them at any time in the chat window of this webinar. They'll come through, and we'll get through all of the questions at the end. And Julie, do you want to take over?
Yep, sure. So networking is an incredible, vital part of the career experience, whether, it doesn't matter what industry you're in or your position or where you are in your career, it's absolutely essential. Most days that's one of the most effective ways to find a job. Most of the time you are working with referrals. So it's important to have a personal relationship with people, one, for your own career development, but two, also for your professional development in terms of learning about your field, learning about the industries, learning about new places that you can go in your career. So it's incredibly important to start this process pretty early on. Every single time you're interviewing with that person might be your boss, but in the future that person could be your colleague, your peer. So always remember that you want to develop a relationship with people you meet along the way because they can be an effective and essential part of your network.
So networking is fundamentally about relationship building. This means that it's a two-way street, and it involves communication and ideally mutual benefit with whoever you're networking with. That could be a family friend, someone at work, or someone you've never met before. You're not networking solely to see what you can get out of that interaction. And we'll try to go through the process of networking today.
So just a quick overview of the topics we'll hit today. Researching goals, it's important obviously to understand the opportunities that are out there, what you can explore. Then you also have the type of people that you might want to be in contact with. We'll go into further detail there. The elevator pitch is something that I highly recommend to all of you, thinking through who are you and do it quickly in a nutshell. Your appearance obviously matters quite a bit. We obviously want to say that we're not so shallow about that type of thing, but really people do react to that. So I think it's important to have some guidelines along that. The initial contact, I know some people are really hesitant to reach out because they don't know what to do with the initial contact, so hopefully we can give you some confidence there, as well as figure out what that conversation actually is, tips on what the conversation should entail. And finally, the follow-up, which is just as important as starting a conversation, because how you continue the conversation is how well you're going to develop your network currently and in the future.
Thanks, Julie. So researching goals, be it networking, creating a video game, or finding a cure for Alzheimer's. I'm a firm believer that at the outset of any project, the first two steps are always researching and defining your goals. In networking, the research phase involves researching the industry of your choice, what makes the industry run. By that I mean what differentiates a successful company in this industry from an unsuccessful company. Where are the opportunities for disruption? Why is this the industry for you? How are you going to make a difference? Who are the big players in the industry? Who are the small players? Which do you think are best positioned for success and why? And where do you fit best in that picture? I think it's always important. I'm on the other side of the table, obviously, most of the time. I think what really impresses me is interview candidates who are up on current events. Everyone knows expertise doesn't happen overnight, and no one's expecting a senior in college or a recent college graduate to understand everything. But showing some knowledge and, more importantly, demonstrating that you've done some research on your own reflects true interest, and interest is the most important building block in gaining expertise. The research you do will inevitably better inform your goals as well. Maybe you'll already know what company you want to work for and have your whole career planned out, but more likely your research will generate a ton of questions that can't be answered by Google, but rather only by domain experts. So what do you want to learn? Maybe you want to know what the culture is like in Amazon. I suppose after that article in the New York Times a little while ago, we all have some insight into that, but for a college graduate interested in algorithmic trading, you're probably interested in what the career path at Goldman is like versus a boutique trading firm like mine. In case you were wondering, the answer is obviously the boutique trading firm is much cooler and more fun. Now that you have a better idea of what you want to do and what you need to know, who's going to help you get there, it's time to start networking. So contacts, productive contact acquisition. It's easier today to meet people, reach out to them and have a conversation than ever before. For me, at least, it's become so easy that I think the biggest risk is becoming overwhelmed. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, LinkedIn, blogs. You can literally spend all day, every day, just maintaining your online presence, which I suspect a lot of us do. So to ensure that you're networking effectively and still have time to play basketball, hang out with your friends, and occasionally do some schoolwork, I think it's important to formulate a plan for what I like to call productive contact acquisition. Brian said it before. I thought it's really key, and he put it very succinctly, that the key in networking is maintaining genuine connections that are mutually beneficial. Nobody wants to network just to network. Everybody, wants to get something out of it, but it's also important that everybody's getting something out of it on both sides. So, talk to your friends, family, on-campus resources to help you formulate a plan. Perhaps a friend will know somebody in the industry that you want to get into. And, of course, the Career Center will always be an excellent resource for you to at least help keep you informed as to career fairs and on-campus speakers. Maintain an online presence, but again, I'd say don't kill yourself. A LinkedIn presence, I think nowadays is a must. You don't need to be a member of every group related to your industry of interest and posting daily to group discussions to be relevant or to be networking effectively. Everyone knows not to be shy in this process, but sometimes I say to myself, well, I don't really want to be a bother. I think for students and recent graduates, if you've done your research and you have a clear idea of who you are and what you want to say, by all means bother people. Because in reality, you won't be bothering anyone. You'll be an ambitious and outgoing, interesting young person eager to find employment, i.e. or e.g. the perfect person for people like me to find. Be professional above all else. Connect in a meaningful way and maintain your connections. Don't use, text message speak, lots of exclamation points and emoticons unless the person you're networking with kind of opened up that way. Even then, I'd avoid them. And make sure you respond to all messages within a week. I think it's important that you show consistency. If anybody wants to add to the slide.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I think one of the things that's really important to remember as you move through your career search, your education goals, is it's a very small world, and especially when you start looking into the particular industry that you are interested in pursuing, it's a very small world, and it's great to kind of be on your best behavior, but also be genuine, like Brian and Ben both have said. Make these contacts meaningful, your time with the contacts meaningful.
I'd just add one thing onto what Ben was saying at the end, reiterate what Ben was saying about trying to be prompt. I think that really can't be overstated. There's something called the sundown rule in a lot of practices where you don't let the sun set on an unanswered email or message, even if it's just I'll get back to you tomorrow. There's such a high degree of professionalism and maturity when I see that come from somebody, especially a younger person, there's just nothing worse, in my opinion, than sending a message or an email that you expect a communication response for and not seeing something for 3 or 4 days and then getting a response like nothing ever happened. I find that to be so incredibly rude. So I would just reiterate what Ben was saying, that promptness is just so important.
Great. So Ben, why don't you talk us through what an ideal elevator pitch is?
Sure. Although I'm not sure I have ever actually given one, but the first thing that you want to go through is, who are you? Your elevator pitch is why someone should be interested in you, why you present an attractive opportunity, which frankly for Johns Hopkins recent graduates or soon-to-be graduates should be pretty easy. The two most interesting questions on this slide to me are what opportunities interest you and why, and how do you think this person can help? Your answers should be heavily informed by your research, and the questions themselves are at the root of what networking is about. You're talking to this person because the hope is at least they can help you, and for a truly successful connection to be made, as we've been saying, you can help them as well. Yeah, maybe someday you'll be friends. Some of my closest friends I've met through work, but day one I reached out to them because I needed something, and most likely the reason why a relationship grew there is because they needed something from me as well. So, again, bottom line, make yourself attractive. Make it easy for them to help you. And even better, pitch it so that they're incentivized to help you.
I have an anecdote of an elevator pitch. Once I was flying cross-country with a gentleman next to me who was going to a job fair out in California. And we were talking about his background. He happened to be an engineer and getting his master's. And one of the first things I asked him was, what is your elevator pitch? He looked at me a little wide-eyed, a little confused, and not sure how to answer me. And I explained to him how you have so few minutes with someone, you want to be able to just sell yourself immediately. So I worked with him on that flight and helped him construct a 30, 45-second elevator pitch. One of the things you have to realize is, again, you don't have enough time, but two, it's not about regurgitating your resume. There's no reason for you to talk about something that's so basic like, oh, I'm currently in a master's program. Like, congratulations, there are thousands of you out there. What makes you unique? What makes you interesting? What makes you someone that they want to get to know, whether it's professionally in a specific job capacity or professionally because they want to be able to work with you later on, or maybe introduce you to other people later on. So think about those things when you are putting together an elevator pitch. It shouldn't just be a factual thing. It should feel human, and you should be able to connect with someone emotionally.
I guess I have one other little anecdote. I also haven't really had to do much elevator pitching, but we had to do an exercise that was, our management called it like the business card exercise. And it was basically taking our 5-year plan combined with our resume and kind of putting together something that would fit on a sheet of paper the size of a business card. So kind of your mission statement of what you want, and you can certainly gear it toward the specific person that you're talking with, but thinking of making it that succinct and that clear has always stuck with me, especially regarding these kind of initial contacts. We can go on to the next slide. Brian, did you want to talk a little bit about appearance?
Yes, definitely. So some of this stuff ends up being kind of straightforward, but it's very dependent on the setting and type of interaction that you have planned. I think there's some overarching important guidelines that are always relevant, and these should be that you should be neat and clean, and hopefully that goes without saying, but and it may be obvious, but your appearance is the first part of the first impression, and this is before you even say a word. I mean, if you happen to run into someone at the gym, I think they'll understand that if you're wearing gym clothes because that's appropriate clothing, but if you arrange a meeting or you go to a more formal networking event, you should dress professionally. You don't need to wear a suit or the equivalent necessarily, but I suggest you wear something that's comfortable for you and that you feel confident wearing, and you feel confident that you're looking your best and putting your best foot forward to make a good impression. I think it's a general rule, though with some definite exceptions. You don't want to be remembered for your appearance. You want people to remember you for your ideas, your skills, your personality. And again, I think there are maybe some exceptions, but if you take that as a sort of overarching, that when people remember, at least in my experience, when people are remembered for their clothing or their appearance, it's usually because it was something outlandish and it's not remembered well. Though I will put that with the caveat that I'm in a slightly more conservative field, being in medicine, and I'll open it up to the other panelists who have some different experiences, perhaps.
Yeah, actually, Brian, for you and
you.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, Brian, for you and for the other panelists, kind of a classic question that I've struggled with myself. Do you ever think it's a concern for the interviewee to be better dressed than the interviewer?
That's a tough question. In terms of the overall, in terms of being more casual, less casual, do you mean? So better dressed, as in more formal?
Yeah, sure. Like in my field, you know, in hedge fund business in general, guys are fairly casually dressed. You're not talking shorts and flip-flops, but you know, if you showed up in a super fancy suit, you would be by far the fanciest person in the office. Do you think that's ever a concern?
So I think that's a great question, and we've had this discussion before on these webinars. I think it gets back to, and I can't take credit for this, but wearing something that you feel comfortable and confident in. So if you're wearing a super fancy suit and you feel like you look your best, even if the other folks in the office that you're interviewing at seem to think that you look a little bit foolish, you'll still feel confident and comfortable, and you'll come off making the best impression. I think on the other hand, though, if you show up underdressed, no matter how confident and comfortable you are, you probably will feel, you know, that may go away. So, you know, it's just a bit of a tautological definition there, but I think overdressing in general is better than underdressing. And again, trying to
one of the nice things we've talked about like layering a little bit, or like for men, if you're wearing a suit and a tie and your interviewer doesn't have a tie on, might be wearing a polo shirt and khakis, that you do have the option to take the suit jacket off and maybe look a little bit less formal. Or women could wear like a nice blouse and a sweater, so that, you know, you can kind of take a layer off that potentially helps you match maybe a little bit less of a formal appearance, but be overall being overdressed, as long as it's clean and ironed, and like Brian and Ben have both said, if you're feeling good in what you're wearing, being overdressed, I think, is appropriate. And Julie, I know you're kind of in a totally appropriate industry to talk about this, so please add in here as well.
I will definitely say, aside from being in my industry, I'm probably the only one on this panel who really cares about her appearance a lot more than necessary. That being said, I think we do need to make sure you understand there is a difference between networking and interviewing. In the cases that you're meeting someone for the networking purposes, you don't have to be as concerned about whether or not you're overdressed or you're outdressing the other person. The reality is, I think what Brian said is correct, is that you should feel confident and comfortable in what you're wearing when you're in a networking situation. You obviously don't want to walk across a marble floor with 6-inch stiletto heels and hoping for the best to get to your person on the other side, but you definitely want to consider and make sure that you look as though someone that is presentable, because sometimes in a networking situation, if you grab coffee by that person's office, that person might be like, hey, let me bring you by the office and have you meet other people. And what happens if you show up with your, SpongeBob SquarePants onesie? Probably not the best case scenario. You probably want to look a little bit better than that. So just be aware that there is definitely a difference between interviewing and networking attire. You don't have to worry as much, I would say, in the networking environment, but just be aware that you might be brought into a professional situation and you might have to suddenly present yourself. I've definitely had a situation in which that has happened to me, in which, I just was out for a casual conversation and all of a sudden basically I was in an informal job meeting. So it's important to know what the possibilities are. That being said, ideally before you even have this conversation with someone, you've done the research and you've talked to the right people to figure out how you should be dressed when you show up. It should not be a surprise, especially when it comes to the interview. You should know exactly what kind of industry you're going into and understand what the expectations are. And Molly is right. I'm in a very casual industry. I work in marketing. For most of the days I'm in jeans. But if I have a client meeting, you bet that I'm going to be dressed up and wearing real clothes. And I sometimes stress out about those days, I'm not going to lie, because I like wearing jeans. But that's a part of your career. You know that you need to shine on those days, so you make that effort.
All right, let's go on to the next slide. And Julie, let's keep you going here and talk a little bit about the online appearance.
Sure. Obviously, as you are aware, your online appearance is something that's very easily accessible. Ideally, you have your name out there in a positive way, but sometimes you just have to pay attention to where else it might exist. As someone who does interviews, I definitely search for my interviewee before I go into a meeting with them and see what their background is. Sometimes it's just to check to confirm, like, yes, they have worked here, or yes, they've done that, but also just to get a sense of their personality. I think it's one of those things where, you can network all you want and meet 17 million people, but I think when you connect on a more personal level or get on the same wavelength in terms of personality, it makes a big difference. So for me, an online appearance is incredibly essential. How you exist digitally, so where it could be something as simple as your email address, make sure it's not like cute hottie 264 at Gmail. Make sure it's probably your name or something close to that. What you have in your blogs is important as well. If the content that you provide out there is going to be judged for better or for worse, so watch what you do say. One of the things that people forget is the Google Plus account. So if you have a Gmail, a lot of people have the Google Plus account set up already without them realizing that they have their content online. So you want to check that. Obviously, anything that you really put words or photos into, really just pay attention to that and make sure that it's something that you find your parents seeing. Don't let those things be a deterrent in terms of someone wanting to talk to you or work with you. So do a periodic check your privacy settings as well. If it's not something that you want publicly available, you only want your friends to know, then make sure your settings are there. Some people like to set Google alerts on their names just so that way if something comes up online that you're aware of it, because I think a lot of people forget that people can be talking about you without you actually talking about yourself. And then just always remember what you post is searchable. So whether it's a photo, words, anything, links, shares that you do, people can see that.
All right, and we'll jump on to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about the initial contact. So particularly regarding the planned networking events, and if you could just show all the slides, this one seems to be animated, or all of the points. Regarding planned networking events, assuming you've completed thorough research prior to the event, the initial contact can really be pretty simple. Use the information you've gathered about maybe this is like a cocktail hour or like an informal gathering after a panel that you've attended or something, or specific networking event. Use information you know about the people that are attending the event to make it personal. So share, if you were referred to this event by some mutual contact, friend, family member, previous employer, things like that, use that and provide it as a reference so that the person you're talking with can remember you more than just a name or a suit, but on a personal level. So describe who you are, communicate what your plans are, what your goals are, and share, like I said, something personal. Make it so that you don't want to tell your whole life story, but give little anecdotes or talk about something specific about this industry that you're so excited about, and show your passion, and that just helps you be memorable. And one of the most important things here is Julie has said it a couple of times, this isn't an interview. This is where you are sharing information in a way that will hopefully end up being mutually beneficial for both parties. So remember that you're not asking for a job. You're not asking about specifics about that person's employment or about taking liberties with talking about like future salary or things like that. That is not the time for that, those conversations. And like Brian and Ben have both said, prompt follow-up is really important. For chance encounters where you don't even realize that you're going to be in a networking scenario, the elevator pitch can be a great tool that you can fall back on. So you can use that, kind of expand upon it just a little bit during maybe a planned event, but have that in your back pocket for something where you don't even realize, like Julie said, just mentioning, just sitting on a plane next to somebody, you can really pique their interest and create a network in some of the most surprised places. I think that's, anybody else have anything to share about the initial contact? All right, Brian, you want to take over and talk about the actual conversation?
The conversation, sure. So it's been mentioned already a few times about doing research and preparation, but this conversation really is all about preparation. It's important to know what your goals are going into the discussion, not necessarily having the entire conversation mapped out. Remember, this is a conversation, which means that both people contribute, and hopefully it's organic and comfortable and has a flow. You should obviously demonstrate respect and professionalism by not only being on time, but knowing what you want to talk about. It's important to realize how busy people are, and so you should try to be succinct, be honest and genuine, and let your person you're having a conversation with know what your goals are. It's important to try to have an appropriate conversation style for this person. Think about what is the person's age, what's their status and their role. And remember that you may have something to offer even to someone who's significantly more senior in status than you. And in fact, you may have more to offer than you even know. If the conversation doesn't immediately result in your desired outcome, think about the opportunity at the end of the discussion to ask about this person connecting with you with someone else. If you didn't get the desired outcome, likely or possible the person still wants to help you and may connect you with someone who can. And so just trying to remember that the networking is a two-way street, and you're not just taking here, you're thinking about what you can give. And sometimes it's hard to know that you have something to offer, but trying to keep that in mind, what is it that even someone in a more junior role can provide makes you a much more interesting person to converse with.
I say one of the most important things is don't ask yes or no questions. This is your chance to explore a field, an opportunity, a career, get to know someone. So move the conversation along, and don't sit there and expect them to get on a soapbox and provide a monologue and you clap and it's done. I think it really should be a conversation and a discussion, and it should be a good deal of back and forth. I mean, you should be able to lead them into asking questions about you too. It's, we said this is not a one-sided conversation where it's for your benefit. Have them explore you as well.
Great, and we can go on to the next slide. Julie, do you want to talk about this?
I think we've mentioned multiple times the promptness is key. Definitely within 24 hours. Do not send an email at 2 a.m. I know that y'all are students and you're studying all day and all night. Don't send a 2 a.m. email. That's just annoying. But do it at a decent time and do it within 24 hours. Just let them know that you appreciated the time and the conversation. You know, paper notes are almost the thing of a past, it feels. So definitely send an email if you have their email address. If you have their number, you could certainly send them a text, but I think emails are usually easy. It's innocuous. They can look at it when they have the time to look at it. Don't follow up with a phone call. That's just a little awkward for most of, I mean, I personally don't use my phone very often. And be careful about proper spelling and grammar. Just make sure that, you know, it's something that's okay to send out and share, because you never know, they might forward it to someone else. So you just want to make sure that you've presented yourself as well as you can. I think it is helpful to keep a log of who you've contacted over time. I personally have a Google Drive document that I update with people that I've met along the way, because I think it is nice to know who you've spoken to, because at some point that person might be a helpful networking contact for someone else. And be like, oh, right, I spoke to that person about X, Y, and Z. You should talk to this person. And keep all of your contact information, or keep your contact informed about where you are, whether or not, you know, it was just a conversation, talk about career development versus actually finding a job. Your network is just a valuable tool throughout your career. It's not just a one-time thing. It builds along the way, and you should start at a young time. Ways of keeping up with people, you can certainly, you know, drop them emails, send them notes in the mail, call them. I meet a lot of people for coffee over time or over a drink during happy hour. One thing I find really nice too is if there are any networking opportunities to invite to them, whether it's an event or a society or professional group, that's a nice way to keep in contact. And if anything, you can definitely take the LinkedIn route and make sure you at least have their contact information there. Almost everyone uses it in their professional capacity, and it's a great way to get in contact with everyone. And we've also seen the launch for Hopkins in particular. For this community, we also have the Go Hop online. I just actually linked my account earlier this week. By that I mean, I guess, yesterday. So consider that as an opportunity for networking as well. The Go Hop online, you can reach that using your LinkedIn account or your Facebook account, but I would recommend LinkedIn over Facebook for professional purposes.
Okay, Julie, quick question for you. This had come up in previous discussions. If you don't hear back from a follow-up, or do you, well, I guess two questions. Do you suggest putting something in there to ask, you know, something that would prompt a response? And if you did expect a response, what's the time window do you think is appropriate before following up a second time, or should you not follow up a second time?
This sounds like a dating question as well. Yeah, so I think that the key is, if you do want them to respond back to you, position it so that they say something. One thing I always find really helpful in this follow-up is just mention something specifically that you discuss in that conversation, and that usually does allow that person to respond back. If you don't hear back from them, don't pressure them, because one, if you're a working person, you will not have time to keep up with correspondence on the dot, especially when it's not related to your source of income, perhaps. So understand that people do have a lot of things going on in their lives, and they're busy, so sometimes they get a little behind. But I would say if you don't hear back from a week or two, and you have not heard back from them based off of the email that you sent or the note that you sent, then I think that's a fair game to just follow up and be like, hey, didn't know if you saw my note. But if you want a response, you need to position it so that way you get a response. Don't expect them to say like, oh, it was great meeting you too, because sometimes it's kind of a throwaway, and it's like, okay, obviously I enjoyed meeting you, but do I have to send an email to indicate that? Not necessarily.
Great. Anything from you, Ben, or anything else to actually add here, Brian, before we go on to questions?
I thought Julie's idea of keeping a Google Doc or some other organizational scheme is really important too, especially if you're waiting follow-up on emails, or you have questions, kind of things outlying, or even just keeping a list of people you've networked with. I certainly can't keep all those names and contacts and everything in my head, and so I do a similar sort of thing, and it's really been invaluable since I started doing it. I wish I had started sooner.
One of my colleagues takes a picture of somebody's business card, and then in the notes section of the picture, they just put some keywords and some things to help them remember as well. So it just, we always have our phones on us, so it's a quick, easy way to add the notes.
Business cards are definitely a helpful thing to walk around with. Most of the time, you're not going to carry your stack of business cards from all the people you meet, but being able to collect that and, like Molly said, taking a photo of it's really helpful. Either that or just at least inputting it somewhere so that way it's accessible.
Mm-hmm. It's important too. One other thing I wanted to add, even if it's somebody that you know informally, and if you had some type of a business networking contact with them, send them a thank you note. It just kind of provides a different facet of your, maybe a long-standing relationship with this person, whether it's a former babysitter, cousin, or whatever. Send a thank you note or, a follow-up note to them as well, and allow that professional side of your relationship to develop, and remember that these contacts can end up potentially being a huge help for you, even for somebody that might have informal stories to share about you, or you grew up with them or whatever. Use them as professional contacts as well.
Yeah, on that, I would say that if you do initiate conversations, regardless of how it's done or where it's done, always send a thank you note. The burden, I think, is on you to show that professionalism.
Mm-hmm. Totally true.
And something that we've kind of hinted at a couple times on the call, but I don't know if we've actually said it explicitly, is that, your network isn't necessarily there to help you in the way that you think it's going to help you all the time and in an immediate way. Oftentimes, your network is going to help you the most when you least expect it in an extremely strange way. I worked at the same firm for 14 years, and I really thought that I was never going to move, and yet I still maintained a network, more just because I enjoyed it from personal, connecting to people personally. And then I found myself at a place in my career where 14 years in, all of a sudden I needed to make a move, and I needed to make a move quickly. And it was actually awesome to see how many people were there for me and were happy to help me. And now I'm, at my new job, and I'm super excited.
Awesome. So I think we can segue now into some questions. I'm not sure, Jessica, if you can see any questions that have come through.
I'm sorry, I'm not
questions
sure if my mic's working right now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
One question. We have, what is the biggest mistake to avoid when networking?
Make sure that you show the right. I was going to say, I think one of the biggest mistakes you can make is not being genuine. If you are doing it and putting on a facade, people can just see right through it. So act as much as yourself as possible, and recognize that you should be obviously professional in that. Do I really want to help this person? I don't know what they want to do or what they're trying to get at. Let's figure out how we can help you.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Julie on that. I think it's an excellent point. I don't really have much to add even. I think that's exactly it. Genuine.
I might say that and it probably dovetails with what Julie said, is remember about burning bridges. That can happen from something as simple as just forgetting to get back to somebody. Obviously, this is not just having a negative interaction. Sometimes it's just keeping connections fresh in terms of your networking. And so never underestimate the value of being connected with other people. Like Ben said with his story, he didn't expect to make a change, and then all of a sudden he did. And if you didn't have those things, it changes the whole dynamic of your situation.
I think one of the best things you can do is let your passion come through, and that helps make you real. It helps make you genuine, and more of the story comes out. So let your passion be part of this process.
I will say one of the things that comes through networking, interview, any single time you're in a conversation or in a situation with another person, trying your best to read that person. I find that sometimes people will go in and they're so focused on what they want to do, and not to say they're being selfish, they're just so focused they don't understand what else is going on. So when you have a conversation with someone, just pay attention and sort of understand if they're in it or if they have a point of view on it. Otherwise, you're talking to a wall, and that's not necessarily the best case scenario.
I think that's a great point. It's something that I believe we do often. I do it often, is listening just enough to be able to form your own response to what they're saying. Listen to people's answers. I think that's a really great point, Julie. Not just to their answer, but their, read the situation. Great. So Jessica said there's no more questions at this time. So I think we'll close up, and we, SDS and those of us who have been part of this, we definitely appreciate your involvement with listening to this presentation. Our website is listed on the screen, on the slide right now. It's sites.krieger.jhu.edu/SDS. And the four panelists, I don't know, Jessica, if you want to go back to, I think it was maybe slide 3, just to put our names back up there on slide 2. Again, this was Molly, Julie, Ben, and Brian, and we certainly would be happy to be future networking contacts for you if you reach out. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks for joining the call.